discuss further, we're joined by Lesiba Mothata from Investment Solutions. Great to have you with us, Lesiba. Now, are we all being very dramatic, or is this really the hardest budget yet because of that downgrade the credit rating agencies circling?
Yeah, we're at the crossroads. It is one of the hardest budgets to construct, but tough decisions ought to be taken. In other words, we're no longer at the cliches of talking about a difficult balancing act. That was true for the last 7 years of the budget.
Now it's an impossible balancing act.
Well, you see, so we got to do things. So the talking needs to translate to deeds. Where we're sitting, an investment grade downgrade into junk, it's not a cheap outcome.
What exactly does it mean? You've been looking at what it really means when we say it's dismal, it's cataclysmic. Why?
Well, you see, there are two types of ratings that happens, and just to clarify, you get ratings on the local currency denominated debt in rands, and they were sitting firmly in investment grade. So this international ratings that we're talking about quite frequently is on the international foreign denominated currency debt. So they were sitting at BBB minus, and we're going to turn it into junk. It does not necessarily mean that we'll get booted out of benchmarks like the CTWIG, but it is a dire economic outcome. If you look at countries like Colombia, in '99 they were downgraded into junk, and when it happened, it was when they also needed a bailout from the IMF, because it's such a dire outcome, and it took them 12 years to come out of that scenario, with equity markets falling, the currency depreciating, etc. But if you look at other examples like South Korea, in the 1997 outcome, they got downgraded 4 notches down, and the currency actually appreciated and equity markets went up because of the agility of the authorities, how they responded to it. It took them only 1 year in junk. So it depends on how one responds, and that is why all eyes are on tomorrow's budget to see what the response is. It's not a balancing act any longer, it's of particular importance.
All right, so this is before we're downgraded, we're trying to prevent that. The big question is, even if Pravin Gordhan does everything right, says all the right things, can we avoid that downgrade? Because one of the biggest concerns of the rating agencies is growth, and we're just languishing.
Yeah, so in other words, we are now sitting below potential growth. And if that potential growth actually goes further down, it suggests that South Africa becomes a 1.5 economy as opposed to 2 or 2.5. That is problematic, and that is why this is a unique budget. We cannot continue in the path that we have been. There needs to be a strong expression of economic reforms that will unlock this economy, that will make sure that there's enough infrastructure, the leakages that happens are actually plugged, that we don't see ourselves as a Colombia.
Well, what is a strong expression of economic reforms? What are you hoping to hear?
You see, we've got a few things on the expenditure side that can be curtailed very easily. The wage growth in terms of the wage bill, we can curtail.
So we freeze new jobs in government.
Exactly.
Do we cut jobs in government?
Well, it's a tough one, hey? So if you look at countries in Europe, they get to that. Austerity is required. In other words, you got to just make a recommendation of the skills versus what's required, and also sometimes you have to make some redundant. That is required. Also, we mustn't introduce new expenditure without clarity of how it's going to be funded. So this discussion of power generation is an important one. We're augmenting it from many different sources, but let's not introduce new expenditure without clarity of where it's going to be funded.
Okay, so you mean nuclear, that we should hold off?
Potentially could be that. Where's the money going to come from? I'm a bit concerned, and I'll get clarity tomorrow. $10 billion has been set aside by Beijing to help South Africa on infrastructure. Okay. This is from the SONA. I wonder if that is a contribution from Beijing towards nuclear, or from any other expenditure. But it also strikes me that why do we need even external assistance at this point? Because with what we have, we can construct a budget that's solid enough to withstand the economy going forward, even in avoiding a downgrade.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm also going to look out for that. Do we need taxes to go up? Is he going to have to go there, and where will it be? Because VAT has been this issue we don't touch because it'll hurt the poor. Corporate taxes, we don't want to deter foreign investment. So what do you do?
You know, if you put growth in the growth in the center of the debate, tax discussions ought to come out. There is no solution in raising taxes. Not for the households, not for the corporates, not even on wealth or dividends, etc. Because what happens is, in the short term, you may improve your coffers, but you're eating away from the economic growth. Monetary policy, it's constraining economic growth because it's tighter. Fiscal policy increasingly is going to be tighter. What is happening is policy from both ends is contributing to grinding this economy to a recession, also to grinding it to lower potential growth. That becomes a certainty of a downgrade into junk in 24 months. And when in there, it can even go further down, like the outcome we're seeing in Brazil. We are not in Brazil yet, but it could get there very quickly.
Okay, so you're not a fan of tax hikes. I think one of your colleagues was saying it could be a short-term solution, which actually means that the SOEs, for example, the state-owned entities, can carry on being inefficient instead of addressing those fundamental issues. I'm
dismayed that we're even discussing tax hikes. I just don't think that where we are at the crossroads in terms of where we take this country going forward, we're even talking about tax hikes. It's not appropriate. It's not the solution. It may be a short-term one, but it doesn't deal with the structural issues. So
then where will the money come from? Because surely it's not enough just to cut the wage bill, to cut back on some waste. Is that enough? Doesn't he have to look at a range of options this time?
I do think you can, with the constructs of what's happening in the economy, to raise income, but you have to make you have to make long-term tough decisions for gain later. Because where we are now, if you were to allow the corporate sector to take much more lead in economic activity, you generate economic growth for the future, and that will improve your revenues going forward, which will be a better solution than trying to just eke out from the economy as we find ourselves at this point. It's not the solution.
Does this mean partial privatization, allowing firms to come in, buy up little parts, bring efficiency, resources, and to follow up? Is that palatable, do you think? Could he get it through this political quagmire in South Africa?
The SONA has made expression that they're looking at the state-owned enterprises. From the website, there's about 129 state-owned enterprises. Although the SONA was talking about how they're going to re-look at it, think about those that are not core to the developmental state philosophy and sell them, a new one was introduced in the SONA to distribute ARVs to the Department of Health. It's a bit confusing if you ask me in terms of the message.
A state-owned pharmaceutical company.
Yeah, it was introduced at the SONA, so we have 130 now. And we're trying to make it count. It's a bit conflictory.
All right, well, let's wait and see with bated breath what Pravin Gordhan's going to say. Thank you for your time, Lesiba Mothata from Investment Solutions.